Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to another Windows Phone Lightning Design Review. I am Lincoln Anderson with 352 Media Group, and today we're going to be taking a look at a few apps and talking about how they can be tweaked or improved design-wise. We're going to be talking about Windows Phone design language as well as just general design tips and ideas. So we have 6 apps today. You guys are challenging me to fit everything I have to say into this time box, so I'll try to not be too wordy. Just making sure my sound is good here. All right, I'm good to go. So let's get started. The first we're going to look at is called Alarms Plus, and this is pretty much a very robust alarms application. You can set your alarms to go off at a certain time. You can set them to repeat. If you have trouble waking up in the morning and just hitting the snooze button, there are features to help you basically annoy you. There's little puzzles you have to unlock and whatnot to get your alarms turned off. The screen that I would like to focus on first is just the app icon itself. So this is a fine app icon. It's just the name of the app in a handwritten font. That might be the Seago script font. I'm not sure. So I mean, it's legible, it's clear, it's high contrast. So all of those things are good. I wondered if there was something that could be done really simply using some iconography, maybe some things inspired by the Seago symbol icon set. And maybe just some flat vector illustrations that you could get off of a stock icon site if you're not comfortable creating your own illustrations. So here, it's an alarm clock with a plus sign in the middle. Still has the name of the app itself on there, but it's just something that just takes the concept of alarms and just adds an interesting little spin on it. I don't think these app icons need to be a work of art, but you want to create something memorable, not only easy to recognize if you have it pinned, but also something memorable if a user hears about your app and then they're looking for it in the marketplace, something that jumps out at them. So that's just one idea. On the main page of Alarms Plus, so a few things jumped out at me here. Just some general design stuff. It looks like the Alarms logo is stretched, and it could just be I'm not sure. Compared to the tile itself, the logo definitely looks like it has one of them is being stretched. I don't know if one's being squished or the other's being stretched out, but it just, wherever you have your logo, whatever you're going to call your logo, just make sure it's consistent sizing wherever you have it. The other thing I want to talk about here was color. There's this sort of cyan background color being used across the app, and then there's also this purple color being used as the foreground. I don't think either of these are the user's accent color. It's a custom branding, a custom theme for this app. And that's fine, but I do think you want to be careful about using colors that don't clash. So you can see where we have the white text on the purple. That's very easy to read. And then where the purple is just a shape, like the tile on the cyan, I think that's okay as well. But the Alarms Plus having the purple tile or the purple text on the cyan background, it just clashes a little bit, and it looks kind of muddy too. There might be like a little drop shadow on there or something. So it creates a feeling that's not as crisp as it could be. And I don't know if the branding is really strong with an application like this. It's kind of a utility app. So I don't know how much you really need to tailor that outside of the user's default light and dark theme and accent color that they've already chosen. So the other thing about the screen, and one minor note, I don't know if the developer's planning on putting circle buttons in the app bar on the bottom, but if you're just planning on that being an app bar that's really only has options when you go to expand it, you can minimize the app bar so it's very thin and it just has those 3 dots to expand the bar, so it doesn't take up as much space. Just something you might want to consider. The other thing I want to talk about was just navigationally we're going to see a screen in a second of how this page changes once you actually have some data, once you've actually set some alarms. But right now, and even in that scenario, this screen isn't as informative as it could be. It's kind of you have to tap on something to really get at the information. And I wonder if this could be set up as like a pivot where you have a big title alarms and then a big title to do or to-dos along the top, and you can just pan between them. And you've really got everything at your fingertips, and instead of having to tap in to see what the list of active alarms are. So your pivot view would be the side-by-side pages that you can just flick your finger to the side and you'll just swipe from one list to the other. So once we see that these tiles are actually, they're almost emulating some live tile type of functionality that you might see, but it's inside this application. So there are some minor design issues here, like the text is touching the edge of the container, and if you have a container, you want to add some padding, so it just gives the content some room to breathe inside of the tile. But again, this is a scenario where I'm seeing I have one alarm for 249. I don't know if this cycles through or if I had 3 alarms. I'm not sure what it would say. But if it was a pivot view with a list, I'd be able to see all of them right there, and maybe just have a toggle button for each one to just turn them on and off one at a time. And I just think that would be a lot more convenient, less taps, and just more information coming to the surface for the user. This is also a good opportunity to talk about live tiles. This is a link to the template guide on MSDN of what you can do with live tiles. If you're not familiar with creating those yet, there's basically templates. You don't just have a pixel area to do whatever you want. There are you can cycle through images, or you have an area for text or a number update for just a certain number of alerts or messages from the application. So that link will give you some ideas of what to do. If you find yourself trying to emulate a live tile in your app, I would just ask if that's really the best scenario for it, or you really want to do something that's more useful inside of the app, and then use the live tile functionality to actually expose that out to any pinned tiles outside of your application. And this, I think Alarms Plus could take advantage of that as well. If you could actually see from your start screen what alarms you have going, that would be useful. And maybe even toggle them on and off from that screen if that's possible. So the next app we're going to look at is called WMN Live, and this is a social network. And so this app is in really good shape. A lot of the things that I would just kind of default to nitpick about in applications as far as adhering to the Microsoft's design language, this app is really doing a lot of those things already. So I did want to just kind of point out a few things that popped into my mind looking around on the different screenshots. One of them is the icon that's currently being used. I think it's nearly identical to the SMS icon that's built into the system. So that could just be a little bit confusing for users. I think it's fine to be inspired by an app icon that's that's just in the default native apps, but you may just want to add, maybe the letters WMN onto it somewhere, or it's a voice. What the app icon looks like, a little voice bubble with a face. You want to do something different with the face, just something to differentiate it, so that users don't get confused between those two apps. That might be a good idea. Looking at this screen in particular, this recent messages and comments from people in your social network. I had a couple of questions for the developer. I'm not sure if the number next to the name, if that's important. It's very tiny, and now that I have this full screen, it's at least legible, but it's extremely tiny on the phone. And I don't know if that's just a debug information, like that's just there for the developer right now to reference as like an ID for the user, or if that's something that users actually find useful in the product to actually go find someone later. But I would just recommend making that a little bit bigger and maybe having a different treatment of it. It looks kind of odd being like a superscript like that. So I don't know if that's an important number or not. Right now it just kind of looks stuck on there. Looking at the view one comment links, I don't really, it almost looks like a button or a tile treatment. I don't think that that's a standard styling of an interactive element on Windows Phone, but the content is oftentimes tappable itself, even if you don't underline it or make it blue or put it in a box or something like that. So I think that you could just say one comment in that area with just normal text, and if the user taps on that, they can find out what that comment was. The other thing you could think about using is a circle button or an icon like you have down below in your circle buttons in your app bar. You can see there's a little gear and there's a plus sign. You could use like a voice bubble icon next to where it says one comment, just to kind of make that jump out at users and feel a little bit more clickable, like it has some weight to it instead of just being informative, that it's more of an interactive element. So other than that, there's some indenting issues, like the names are indented by a little space for some reason on some of these. I'm not sure what's going on there, but overall this looks pretty good. This developer is also doing sort of a dashboard screen that emulates live tiles, or at least the appearance of live tiles, and I think that that's fine. I would wonder if presenting this as a pivot would be, again, more informative. I'm not seeing, there's a large tile for conversations in this screenshot, and I'm not seeing if there are going to actually be recent comments and messages actually cycling through on that tile. So maybe these tiles kind of come to life and actually surface important information as you're using the app. But in either case, I think that a pivot can work just as well. Being able to just swipe left and right and see conversations, live stream, groups. I think one of the dangers with doing a dashboard with live tiles is that it kind of constrains you into these squares, and that's fine if you have enough content to really fill them out. But I don't think there's anything wrong with doing a custom layout. Maybe conversations is really important, and that's something that you want to take half the screen real estate up with. Whereas live stream and my watch list, those are more of just a circle button and a text label. That would be just as good for those, and they don't need to take up as much space. So I think this could be really useful. Just don't always lock yourself into trying to emulate live tiles. The other thing I would just say about this is the edit link, the little text label next to the name and the my groups on the bottom, that little blue edit, that's a little odd to me. Just the fact that it's superscripted again a little bit, it just kind of looks like it was accidentally left in there. I would say that if you want, I would either present those as when you just tap on your name or the My Groups title itself, that lets you edit, or once you go into maybe in the app bar, there's an option for settings or My Profile. You could access it that way. Typically, I think presenting this as live tiles pivot to navigate around the app, that's great. When you have something that's more like a command or utility, then that works better as an app bar button. Another interesting thing about this this screen itself is that it does a good job of adhering to the Windows Phone grid. If you're not familiar with the grid, the link here is a PNG of it's basically just a bunch of squares on a graphic that is the size of your Windows Phone screen. And this you can download it from this link if you're a designer and you just want something in Photoshop to overlay over your design comps. But it also comes as a resource in Windows Phone projects. It's in some of the page templates that you can just create, and it'll be commented out in the bottom of the XAML, and you can enable it, and then you have a grid that's running over your live app as you're designing in Blend or as you're running it in debug mode, and you can see if your visual elements are lining up to this grid. And it's really just to help you align things and space things nicely and make things look crisp. And I'm sure you've looked at apps where everything looks like it's in the right place, and that's achieved by following this grid alignment. So if you look at, I've overlaid this dashboard view for WMN Live, this main page. And you can see I had to shift over the PNG a little bit by maybe 5 or 10 pixels to get it to line up. So that might just be an issue with the, maybe this developer has the exact right sizes for the tiles. They've chosen the tiles in the margin to match what's going on in live tiles, but just the overall layout is shifted over a little bit. So there's might be a little bit of correction there. But if you look and you see each one of these tiles, it lines up exactly. It snaps into a region defined by those little red squares. The red squares are the part that's the grid that you want to overlay. So you can see that there's a little bit of tweaking to be done to line up for it, but it's in a really good direction overall. And I think it really affects making your layout breathe and making it so you're taking advantage of the space that's available, but things don't look crammed together. It just looks nice and aligned and clean. So what we're going to look at is called City Guide, and I have to apologize to this developer. A zap file in. I just didn't get a chance to actually install it and check it out on the emulator, but I did read the description of the app, and basically it's kind of a portal app. It will go out and look at where you are right now, just your location, and it'll find everything you see here, all these categories, restaurants and hotels and shopping malls in your area, and it'll surface that stuff up to sort of a dashboard view. So I have the same comments that I have for live tiles on these other applications, and that is that you might be able to do some interesting things inspired by live tiles, but having your own custom layout is always an option as well. And that really, I think, could be a benefit of this application. There's lots of different ways that users can get local information, what's going on in their area. They can search the web, but really, what makes this app unique is what's really going to sell it. So, for example, I'll just click on the next page to give you an example of how, determined by how important each one of these categories is to the user, you can take up more or less screen real estate, even if you wanted to keep that sort of live tile inspired layout. So, and this sort of like proportion of showing larger elements that are more important and then smaller elements that are less important, but you still want them to be available, this could be something that the user determines, that they actually tell the application that, hospitals are great when I need them, but really, 9 times out of 10 I'm using this app for restaurants, or it's something that your app could actually respond to. You could have that initial layout that we just looked at a second ago, but once the user taps on restaurants a few times, the app starts to recognize, okay, what this user is really interested in are restaurants. And I would actually recommend, if this interests you, if you're the developer on this app, that you check out some magazine layouts. If you look at like a table of contents in a highly stylized magazine, you'll see how their featured stories, the things that are really important that they want to push to the reader, are really big. They're taking up a lot of room, and they maybe surface some of the content, like they'll make the page number that article is on really big. They'll make the title really big. And then the things that are just normal series of articles that you still want to know where they are, but they're not something that's really featured or just off to the side, and they're just a list of articles with a page number. So you can kind of tailor your layout to be a little bit more customized to the user. I think if it's, it might be some elbow grease to get it to be really responsive like that, like the app learns what's interesting to you and actually changes its format and layout based on that. But I think that would be a really, really cool feature. If every time you come here, it feels like it's really tailored to your interests. The next app we're going to look at is called Task List. And this is a task list app. It has a ton of features, and it prides itself on being just having a lot of flexibility and power at your fingertips, and just being fast. So this is one of those utility apps where there's a lot going on, but I still wanted to offer some design advice on this app. So just a couple of kind of nitpicky things to begin with. One is that the checkboxes, I think these are checkboxes over on the right side. I think those, I imagine that's when you're done with the task, you can check it off. But those, I'm just actually not sure if they are checkboxes, because they have a rounded corner, and they don't quite look like the system checkboxes, just the default skin for checkboxes. In fact, there's another screen in this app, which I don't have, but it actually uses the default checkbox look. It's just more of a rectangular little box. And then so using different types of checkboxes in different pages, that was a little bit confusing to me. So I would just be consistent, and if you can, use the system default. That's what users are accustomed to seeing. A checkbox always looks like a checkbox. But above all, be consistent in your application. Other nitpicky thing, I can see it now. There's a little there's like a watermark background of a bunch of checkboxes, and it's kind of got a perspective skew. It almost looks like it's on the floor in the background. I honestly, I couldn't see that when I looked at it before, and I thought there was a little bit of dirt on my screen. I thought there was a fingerprint or a smear or something like that. So sometimes I think watermark backgrounds are okay. A lot of the time, I don't really feel that they add anything. And in this particular application, I think they can actually make some things harder to read. It's just you're reading text, and then there's this little kind of noise going on in the background. So I would honestly recommend just taking that background out. Especially since it's just a bunch of pictures of checkboxes, and we have checkboxes going on here. So I would, if you have a background that's distracting, absolutely get rid of it. And this app is not about being pretty; it's about being fast and being a great utility. So don't be afraid to get rid of that. The other thing that I want to talk about is just the divisions between the rows of elements here on this page. It makes what's a pretty simple screen, and I think simplicity is really important to this application. We've got a lot of tasks going on, but it makes it simple for you. It makes a simple list look a lot more complicated when you put horizontal lines between every one of these items. So what options do you have? You need to differentiate one task item from the next. So how do we do that? Here I just talk about line spacing. I think this is really key to making any interface look really simple and clean, while not introducing more visual elements. So in the first group, every single line has the same space in between it. So we can say this is a single item in the list. This is a single item in the list, except that it is longer. That's another item. And then this is a single item in the list. So we really have 3 items here, but it looks like 4 lines. It's hard to tell where one item leaves off and the next begins. In the second grouping, it's even worse. The space, the margin between each one of the items is less than the line spacing between the lines that are inside of an item. So it's inconsistent and completely chaotic. I can't tell where one item leaves off and the next begins at all. In the bottom, it's much, much more clear, because the space in between each list item is large, and the space just between the lines in one item is small. So I can clearly see, even though each one of these 3 groups takes up the same amount of vertical space, same amount of real estate, I'm not introducing any lines or anything like that. Just by adjusting the spacing, more space to differentiate items, less space to group them together, I can easily group those items and make it clear that there are 3 items there. So I would recommend take another look to the task list developer. If I can back up here, take another look at this screen and just challenge yourself to see if you can remove those horizontal lines between items and still make it clear where one item leaves off and the next begins. And you have the indenting and whatnot, so I really think you can pull it off. Yeah. Other than that, I think it's a pretty powerful app. I'm excited to use it. The next app we're going to look at is called Custom Tiles, and this is a utility app that will help you to create a tile to perform different tasks, so they don't necessarily need to download a new app just to make a little shortcut to call a phone number or compose a new email or something like that. They can create a tile that does these different things. And they can design it however they want. So you can see here we've got some steps like you can choose what kind of size of tile you want. And there's the next step would be choosing what you want the tile to do, dial a phone number or whatnot. So overall, I think this app is in pretty good shape. I think it's following a lot of the design guidelines. I don't know about the gradient background. I don't think a gradient background like that really adds anything. And additionally, even worse, it kind of clouds some of the text, like gray text on a light gray or light blue gray background. It's kind of hard to read. So I would say, adding background colors in to spice things up I think that's fine. But whenever it distracts or reduces legibility, that's definitely a problem. So I would consider, there's different things you could do here. If you didn't want to go to a black or a white background, the default theme that the user has, you could use this dark blue background all the way down just to make sure all your text is still legible, and make sure that your light blue accent color here pops against the background. So just a little comment there. Looking at this particular page, the plus button down on the bottom, I think it's great that the developer is using the app bar in that way. I'm not sure if that's the confirmation of this. Like, I'm creating a tile right now, and then I tap OK, or that's the button that I press to actually initiate this creating of an app tile. If it's the button that I press to create the initiating of create an app tile, I think that's great. Plus is a great icon for adding something that is new. If it's more of a confirmation, I would either make it a checkbox or I would include it as a button in the canvas area itself to say I'm done. I'm sorry if I misspoke there. I was saying a check mark for the icon to confirm. There's a box right here where you select a tile layout, and there's a little icon for what the tile layout looks like, and then there's a label for what that layout is. And this next one is just a picker, a list of all the options that are available. And my comment on this screen is that the graphics themselves, the little images of the icons and their size and their layout, I think that's way, way, way more useful than the labels themselves. As a user, I'm really picking something out based on the visual. So I would recommend switching up this selection screen so that the images are really large and I can really make a decision visually based on those images. And then the names of the icons, of the layouts, those can be a little bit smaller and more of a subtle text treatment as just a reference label. But I think the visual is so great. There's an icon for every one of these, and it's a nice little layout. I think really showcasing that to the users would be a good idea. Talking about options in general, there's a couple of screens on this page, in this app, where you have a few options to choose from. Here you're saying you can create a simple tile, you can create a tile that has changing images, or you can pick from some defaults. So, and each one of these is really what I'm focusing in on is the treatment of each one of these options. Right now, the option itself, simple tiles, changing tiles, it's in the button, but it's really small. I would make that really the focus of each one of these areas. I would make a big heading that says simple tiles, and you don't even need the button treatment. You say big heading that says simple tiles, and then underneath that, the subtle description that it's simple tiles that do not change. and then a good amount of space, and then a big heading that says changing tiles, and then underneath that a description of that. I think it would really make these pages look a lot less busy, and I think it would also help the user just scan at a glance simple tiles, changing tiles, default, and understand what those are. And then if they want to dig down under each and read the description, they can. But really draw focus to what the options are and just kind of reduce the clutter on these types of pages. So the next app that we're going to look at, I think this is the last one, yeah, is GPS Calculator. This is an incredibly robust app. I was amazed by how much functionality this developer has put into this application. And you can tell, looking at every one of the screens that they have, there's just buttons and inputs everywhere, and it really can do a lot. I'm kind of wondering how I can use this to do some geocaching. But so I wanted to take a look at one of these pages. I'm going to look at two of the pages on this app, but I'm hoping that some of the comments that I make can be used on various screens. So the first screen I want to look at is convert. So this is where you can convert from I guess from a certain type of format of global positioning into latitude, longitude. And my first impression of this page was, wow, this is complicated. There's a lot going on here. And I think that it's really tough with applications like this because they do so much, but at the same time you want to make something that's really complicated really simple for users. It's the whole point of these tools that we make is, offer functionality and make it easy for people. So there's a couple things that I think would help kind of reduce the overwhelming nature of this kind of page. One is if you look down below at latitude and longitude, those look like input boxes, but I don't think that they are. I think that that's just the result of the calculation. So, and it probably was just easy for the developer and made sense, if I'm understanding this correctly. I've seen this before, where a developer will make every input and output on the page, they'll make it an input box or a text box, and then they can just easily populate those regions with labels and numbers. But to me, as a user arriving here, it feels like I need to fill everything out on this screen. It just feels like there's more work for me to do than there really is. When really all of the inputs, I believe, are just on the top of the page and then down at the bottom where you can choose maybe the formatting. So I would just say if something is if it's not an input, you can just use a text block. It doesn't need to be formatted as an input box. The other thing that I was noticing, I was looking at all the different options for how you choose, how you input a point, all these circle buttons, and then how you calculate, and then you can share it with a friend through SMS or email. And so there's a couple of interesting things here. One is using circle buttons, just the circle with the icon in it, inside your canvas is fine. Using the little label underneath it, that's pretty specific to the app bar down below. It looks kind of weird. The text doesn't really align with anything. It just looks kind of out of place. So a page that's designed with them like this, it almost looks like it has 3 different app bars going on. It's a little bit confusing. Secondly, looking at these buttons, it's interesting if you look at calculate, SMS, email, share, those 4 in the middle of the screen. Calculate, really important. That's really the whole focus, if I understand correctly, that's the whole focus of this screen, is I fill out the X and Y positioning, some other options, and then I hit calculate. That's the core functionality, that's the core user scenario for this page. The other stuff, texting it to someone, emailing, share, that's a nice to have. That's great. I may want to send it to myself so I have it later, but it's not the core scenario. So for me, I would like to see the calculate button as like a big rectangular button, like a real button. And then the other options, I'd like to see that, I don't know, maybe down below underneath. I would just kind of scroll down a little bit and find the options. Or maybe they could be something that is in the app bar. It's there if I need it. But again, I think that would help focus on telling the user, here's what you need to do. and just kind of reducing some of the clutter and complexity of this page. I was wondering if there's some other options of what we can do up on the top next to the point where it says on a map and my position. There's a little picture of a globe and a person. I wondered if we could do it with maybe a list picker where you choose from a list where you have options like manual input, on a map, or my position, and then the form itself, or the region where the form is, where you enter in the X and the Y, that could change depending on the option that you choose. So if you say on a map, that changes to be a little map. Or if you say my position, all of the form inputs, stuff that you don't need, goes away, and it just tells you what your position is. So again, I just kind of tailoring the flows to be a little bit more simple and direct. The next screen in this app I want to take a look at was the area screen, and I think this is really cool. You can draw a shape on the map and it'll tell you the acreage, or it looks like that's probably a list picker down on the bottom. You can choose what dimensions you want to measure in. And so same comments on the circle buttons. I think a lot of this stuff really could go in the app bar. And what's nice when you do that, right now the app bar is being used as sort of, I think it's being used as like a status bar of where you are currently. I think it's like tracking your current location, which is not typically what an app bar is used for. App bar is used for contextual commands on the page. So that would be a great place to put map options. Basically what I'm doing here is I'm working with a map. It'd be great to put the map options down there, and then you could even take up more space on the page with a map. You could almost make it a full screen experience when you're calculating area on a map. I think there's an exception with what I just said for the zoom in and zoom out buttons. I think ideally you would want the zooming to be a pinch gesture on the map, a multi-touch gesture, all the navigation and zooming available on the map itself, but sometimes that's not possible just because of technical considerations. In that case, I would actually keep the zoom in and zoom out buttons either overlaid on the map in the corner or somewhere on the canvas, just because that's where users would be accustomed to finding zoom in and zoom out buttons, like let's say on a web-based map. But I think most of the other buttons could really be stored in the app bar. Other thing that I was wondering about this app is there's a calculate button on the bottom, and I was wondering if there was value in automatically calculating as you are dragging the points around, as you're placing the points on the map, if it could just update that number as you're manipulating the map. There might be a scenario where you don't want to do that. You want to draw one shape, and then you want to draw another, and then calculate and compare them so you can see the number change. But I would imagine that 9 times out of 10, the user is just going to want to draw something and see the area, and that extra tap just may not be necessary. I don't know what kind of API this developer is using, if it actually takes time to calculate the area, but it seems like it's just a polygon and it's probably very quick. So just automatically calculating as you're drawing would be a really neat feature. Looking at this page, it's another one of these pages where there's a lot going on. It seems a little bit cluttered, and I'm looking for ways where we can really keep all that functionality and just kind of rearrange some of the elements. If you look, there's a couple of very subtle lines of text. Up at top it says calculate an approximate area of non-self-intersecting polygon. Just some technical jargon, and then down at the bottom it says tap anywhere on the map to add a new point. So these are helpful, but I worry about the fact that they're so subtle and the placement of them is a little bit odd. For me, I want to know tap anywhere on the map to add a new point. I think that should be the first thing that you tell the user. That's really the most important thing that you need to know about this screen. Is I would want to see the instruction, and then I'd want to see the map, and then I'd want to see the different options that I have with it. So I would just kind of switch around the order of things. I also think if you titled this page, and maybe instead of just area, calculate area, maybe you wouldn't even need to explain that it's calculating the approximate area, da-da-da. It would just be more self-explanatory. You could say calculate area, and then there'd be one line of text that says tap anywhere on the map to add points to a shape, or something like that that just kind of summarizes all of it in just less words. I think that would help reduce some of the clutter and make it very obvious. You wouldn't have to hunt around for instructions. Okay, what are all these buttons? What am I doing here? It just kind of builds up in the experience. So, yeah, I think that's it for today. Came in at 40 minutes. That's not bad. So thank you for joining me. The next session is January 17th, 2013. I'm still getting used to putting 2013 on everything. But if you submit your app before Tuesday, we'll make sure to review it. If you've already submitted your app and you want me to take a look at a page that I didn't include, and you want to send me a specific screenshot of something to review, I'll try to get that in as well. So thank you and have a good afternoon.